The rain turned the cemetery dirt to mud that clung to Kenneth Taylor's dress shoes like wet concrete. He stood at the edge of the grave, watching the coffin disappear beneath a layer of artificial turf that was supposed to make this easier somehow. It didn't. Sandra was gone, and the green plastic couldn't hide the hole she left behind. 68 years old, and Kenneth had buried friends in deserts half a world away, had stood over graves in places that didn't appear on maps. But nothing prepared him for this. Watching the woman who'd known every version of him lowered into Pennsylvania clay while distant relatives pretended their phones weren't buzzing with weekend plans. The funeral director was making apologetic gestures about the weather. Kenneth wasn't listening. He was counting. 12 people had shown up. 12 for a woman who'd spent 40 years as a school librarian, who'd known half the town's children by name. The sparse turnout was his fault. Sandra's illness had been long, and he'd turned inward, stopped returning calls, let the world shrink to the size of a hospital room. "Dad." Kenneth turned. His son Kevin stood 3 feet away, close enough to speak, too far to comfort. At 38, Kevin had the kind of looks that sold luxury cars: strong jaw, careful hair, a suit that probably cost more than it should. He'd worn black, at least. Michelle stood behind him, his wife of 6 years, holding an umbrella that protected her makeup but left Kevin's shoulders dark with rain. "We should go," Kevin said. His voice had the smooth emptiness of a man making a business call. "The reception's starting in a minute." Kenneth looked back at the grave. There was supposed to be something profound to say here, some final goodbye. The words wouldn't come. "Dad, give me your keys." Kenneth's hand went to his pocket by instinct, fingers closing around the keyring. His 2008 Lincoln Town Car, champagne gold, 127,000 miles of memories. Sandra in the passenger seat singing off-key to the radio. Road trips to nowhere because Kenneth had 3 weeks of leave and nowhere better to be. "Why?" "You're in no condition to drive." Kevin's hand was already extended, palm up, not asking, expecting. "Michelle will take your car back to the house. I'll drive you." Kenneth looked at his son's hand, manicured nails, no calluses, hands that had never changed their own oil, never dug a fighting position, never held anything heavier than a phone. "I can drive myself." "Dad." Kevin's voice dropped the way it did when he was about to say something that sounded like concern but carried an edge underneath. "You're 70 years old. You just buried Mom. You're emotional. You're a liability." 68, Kenneth almost said, and I drove supply convoys through Fallujah while mortars walked the road behind me. But the words felt petty, small. Kevin didn't know about Fallujah. Sandra had agreed, 30 years ago, that some things stayed buried deeper than bodies. Kenneth's hand emerged from his pocket. The keys felt heavier than they should. "Your good life is over, Dad," Kevin said, closing his fingers around the key ring. It wasn't cruel, the way he said it, just factual. A doctor delivering a diagnosis. You had 40 good years with Mom managing everything. Now, someone needs to take control. The keys were gone. Kenneth's hand was empty. "Michelle," Kevin called over his shoulder. "Take Dad's car back to the house. We'll meet you there." Michelle approached with small, careful steps that kept her heels from sinking into the mud. She took the keys without looking at Kenneth. Her eyes were dry. No tears for Sandra, who'd welcomed this woman into Sunday dinners, who'd bought Michelle's favorite wine even though it cost twice what Sandra usually spent. "I'm sorry for your loss," Michelle said to the air between them. Then she was walking away, her umbrella a black circle retreating between the headstones. Kenneth watched his car leave the parking lot, Michelle's silhouette unfamiliar behind the wheel. Something in his chest tightened. Not grief exactly, something sharper. The same instinct that had made him check his 6 in Baghdad, that had kept him alive when the smart money said he shouldn't be. "Come on." Kevin's hand landed on his shoulder, heavy and proprietary. "My car's over here." Kevin drove a leased Mercedes, black paint perfect despite the rain. Kenneth sank into leather seats that smelled like new money and old anxiety. The kind of anxiety that comes from monthly payments, bigger than some people's mortgages. "There's something we need to take care of," Kevin said, pulling out of the cemetery. The windshield wipers slapped back and forth, metronome steady. "Before the reception." "What thing?" "Financial stuff. Mom left some loose ends." Kenneth's training kicked in before his grief could stop it. Situational awareness, threat assessment. Kevin's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. His jaw was set, and they were heading east, away from the house, away from where 12 people would be eating grocery store cold cuts and pretending to remember Sandra. What loose ends? Kenneth kept his voice level, 68 years old, and he could still sound calm when his pulse was climbing. I paid all the medical bills. The funeral's covered. What's left? The joint account. Kevin didn't look at him. Eyes on the road, lawyer careful. Mom's name was on everything. The bank needs authorization to prevent the assets from being frozen while the estate processes. Kenneth had spent 30 years negotiating with warlords, contractors, and Pentagon bureaucrats. He knew what a lie sounded like. This was a lie. Kevin, it's Saturday. Banks are closed. I made an appointment. Now Kevin glanced over, and his eyes were wrong. Too bright. Too desperate. Frank Coleman's meeting us. He's doing us a favor. They pulled into the First National parking lot. One car sat near the entrance, a silver Lexus that Kenneth recognized. Frank Coleman, branch manager, divorced, 2 kids, a gambling problem everyone pretended not to notice. The kind of man who'd open on a Saturday if the price was right. Kevin, what's going on? Just trust me, Dad. Kevin killed the engine. Rain drummed on the roof. Mom would want this handled properly. That was the second lie. Sandra had been meticulous with money, had balanced their checkbook to the penny every month. Whatever this was, it wasn't loose ends. Kenneth climbed out of the Mercedes. The rain had lightened to mist, but the cold settled into his bones anyway. 70 wasn't old, 68, but it was old enough to feel weather in places that used to be bulletproof. Frank Coleman was waiting inside, unlocking the door himself. Kenneth, I'm so sorry about Sandra. She was a lovely woman. Thank you, Frank. Let's get you taken care of. Frank led them past dark teller stations to his office. Through the glass walls, Kenneth could see the parking lot. Michelle's SUV was there now, parked next to the Mercedes. She was sitting in the driver's seat, phone raised. The red recording light was visible even from here. Kenneth's pulse didn't spike. It went cold and steady, the way it had in Fallujah when the radio crackled with grid coordinates that were too close to friendly positions. They're documenting this. Whatever happens, they want it on camera. He looked at his son, really looked. Kevin was sweating despite the air conditioning. His tie was too tight. His eyes kept darting to Frank, to Kenneth, to the phone in Michelle's hand outside. Sit down, Dad, Kevin said, pulling out a chair. Kenneth sat. Not because Kevin told him to, but because standing made him a target. In that moment, muscle memory took over. Training from a lifetime ago. Make yourself small. Assess the room. Find the exits. There were 2 doors, the one they'd entered through, and an emergency exit near the bathrooms. Windows didn't open. Michelle had the parking lot covered. This was a kill box, not military, financial, but the principle was the same. Frank slid a form across the desk. Kenneth, this is just a simple authorization. Because Sandra's name was on the joint checking and savings, the bank needs verification that you approve transferring management to Kevin temporarily, just until probate clears. Kenneth looked at the form. He'd signed 1,000 contracts, had learned to read legal language the way some men read sheet music. This wasn't an authorization. It was a full transfer. Every dollar in the account, $38,000, their emergency fund, signed over to Kevin's personal control. How much is temporarily? Kenneth asked. 6 months, maybe a year, Frank said. Too quick, rehearsed. And where does the money go? Into a managed account. Kevin leaned forward. Dad, there are medical bills we don't know about yet. Creditors might come calling. If the money's in your name and you're declared, if your mental state is questioned, the courts could freeze everything. This protects you. There it was. The threat hiding inside the concern. If your mental state is questioned. Kenneth looked at Michelle's phone outside. If he refused, if he raised his voice, if he did anything but comply, she had the video. Confused elderly man causing a scene, unable to manage his own affairs. He could fight this, call his own lawyer, expose Kevin right here, right now. But he'd learned in the desert that sometimes you had to lose the skirmish to win the war. Sometimes the smart play was letting the enemy think they'd won. Kenneth picked up the pen. His hand didn't shake, 40 years since his last combat deployment, and his hands still knew their job, but he made them tremble. Just a little. Just enough. If you think it's best, he said, his voice cracking in a way that felt like swallowing glass. Kevin's shoulders dropped. Relief. It's best, Dad. Trust me. Kenneth signed. The pen scratched across the paper, and $38,000 disappeared. Every visible dollar he had, the last money Kevin knew about. Frank typed into his computer, and the transfer processed. 30 seconds, and Kenneth Taylor was officially broke. Kevin took the receipt, folded it, slid it into his pocket like a trophy. Then he did something that made Kenneth's blood run cold. He patted Kenneth's cheek, quick, condescending, the way you'd pat a dog. Good boy, Dad. Kenneth stood up. His legs felt distant, but they held. Can we go home now? Yeah. Kevin was already moving toward the door, checking his phone. Michelle's making sure the caterer's set up. You should rest. You look exhausted. They walked out together, father and son. One who'd just been robbed, one who thought he'd just won. Kenneth climbed into the Mercedes. He watched Michelle pull out of the parking lot in the Lincoln, his Lincoln. He watched Frank Coleman lock the bank doors and walk to his car without looking back. And Kenneth Taylor, who'd coordinated supply lines for 3,000 troops while mortar fire walked the ridgeline, who'd negotiated with men who'd killed for less than $38,000, made a decision. He'd let them think they'd won. But the war had just begun. The house looked wrong. Kenneth stood on the sidewalk in front of 847 Oakmont Drive, the home he'd owned for 36 years, and barely recognized it. A white moving van sat on the lawn, its tires carving deep ruts into grass he'd reseeded every spring. The front door was propped open with a cinder block. What's going on? He asked. Kevin was already out of the car, phone pressed to his ear. Hang on, Dad. Inside, chaos. The entryway table, Sandra's grandmother's antique, the one she'd polished every Sunday, was gone. In its place, cardboard boxes. The smell was wrong, too. Instead of Sandra's lavender sachets, there was only dust and the chemical bite of cleaning solution. Kenneth heard Michelle's voice from the living room, sharp and managerial. No, that goes in the trash pile. We're not keeping that. He walked toward the sound. The living room had been gutted. The couch where Sandra died, not literally, but where she'd spent her final months, too weak for stairs, was being carried out by two men in coveralls. Sandra's reading chair was already gone. The bookshelf that had held 40 years of book club selections sat empty. Michelle stood in the center of it, holding a clipboard like a general surveying a battlefield. She'd changed out of her funeral clothes into yoga pants and a t-shirt that said, "Blessed." Her hair was in a ponytail. She looked like she was preparing for an estate sale, not a wake. Michelle. Kenneth's voice came out harder than he intended. What is this? She turned, and for just a second, something flickered across her face. Not quite guilt, more like irritation at being interrupted. Oh, Dad, you're back. We're just doing some clearing out, getting a head start on staging the house. Staging? The word felt foreign. For what? For sale. Kevin appeared from the kitchen, still on his phone. He covered the microphone. We talked about this, Dad. You can't live here alone. It's too big, too many stairs. We're getting you into Sunny Meadows. You know, that nice facility across town, 5-star, heated pool, all your meals included. We never talked about this. Mom and I did, Kevin lied smoothly. Before she passed, she was worried about you managing this place by yourself. Kenneth looked at the empty room, at the marks on the hardwood where furniture had sat for decades, at the movers carrying out the wedding, china still in its original box because Sandra always said they'd use it for something special. Where am I supposed to sleep tonight? Michelle consulted her clipboard. We set up a temporary space for you, just until the renovations are done upstairs. The dust and fumes would be bad for your lungs. She led him through the kitchen, also being emptied, cabinets open and bare, to a door he'd walked past 10,000 times, the basement door. Kenneth stared at the white-painted wood. The basement. It's fully finished, Kevin said, appearing behind him. Private, quiet. You'll have your own space to grieve. The door opened. The smell hit first. Damp earth, mildew, the scent of things forgotten. Wooden steps descended into darkness until Michelle flipped a switch. A single bare bulb flickered on, casting harsh shadows. Kenneth went down slowly. The stairs creaked under his weight. Each step felt like descending into a grave. The basement wasn't finished. It was storage. They'd shoved the holiday decorations and broken appliances to one side, clearing maybe 10 feet of concrete floor. In the center sat a twin mattress. No frame, no box spring. Just a mattress on cold concrete with a pile of mismatched blankets thrown on top. Next to it were 3 cardboard boxes. His name was scrawled on them in marker. "This is it?" Kenneth asked. "It's cozy," Michelle called from the top of the stairs. "Like a little studio apartment. And look, we brought your things down." One of the boxes had tipped over, spilling its contents across the gritty floor. Kenneth's shadow box, the display case that held his medals from Desert Storm, lay face down. The glass had cracked. The medals had scattered. His bronze star sat next to a dead cockroach. Kenneth knelt down, his knees popping in the cold air. He picked up the medal. The medal was cold against his skin. 33 years ago, he'd coordinated supply drops for 3,000 troops while mortars fell half a mile away. He'd slept on a cot in a tent, eaten MREs that tasted like chalk, survived heat that melted boot rubber. He'd done it because he had a job to do. He looked up at his son, standing at the top of the stairs. Kevin's suit was still perfect. His hands were still soft. He'd never known a day of true hardship in his life because Kenneth had built a wall of money and comfort around him, and now Kevin was using that comfort to bury him. "Okay," Kenneth said, standing slowly. His back straightened just a fraction, his eyes cleared. "I understand." "Good," Kevin looked relieved. "We're ordering pizza upstairs. I'll bring you down a slice later. Get some rest, Dad." He turned away. Kenneth heard his footsteps, heavy and eager, heard Michelle say something in a low voice. Then the door closed. The deadbolt slid home with a metallic snick that echoed in the concrete space. Kenneth stood in the silence. Then he walked to the stairs and climbed them slowly. He tried the knob. It turned, but the door wouldn't budge, locked from the outside. He wasn't a guest. He wasn't a father being cared for. He was a prisoner. Kenneth walked back down. He sat on the mattress and looked around his cell. He saw the exposed ductwork, the structural beams, the small basement window near the ceiling, too narrow for escape but wide enough for light. They thought this would break him. They didn't know who they'd locked up. You don't put a military logistics contractor in a basement and expect him to wither. You just gave him a base of operations. Kenneth reached into his sock and pulled out the one thing they hadn't found during their search, a small flip phone, old and battered. He'd bought it 6 months ago when Sandra first got sick, when she'd looked at him with clear eyes and said, "Kenneth, promise me you'll protect yourself if something happens to me. Kevin's not what he seems." He'd thought she was delirious from medication. Now he knew she'd been warning him. The phone had one number programmed, Douglas Stone, attorney at law. Kenneth didn't call yet. First, he needed intelligence. He unpacked the boxes, not to reminisce, to take inventory. He needed to know what resources he had. Box 1, clothes, all mismatched. They'd taken his good suits. Box 2, toiletries, medications. He opened the pill organizer Kevin had helpfully filled. Monday through Sunday, each compartment holding a small white pill. Kenneth brought one up to the light, oval shape, code stamped on it, TV 58. His heart medication, digoxin, was round and yellow. This was tramadol, a sedative, a painkiller. And in the wrong dosage, for a man his age with a heart condition, it could cause confusion, dizziness, respiratory suppression. It could make him look exactly like the senile old man they were claiming he was. Kenneth wrapped the pill in a tissue and tucked it into the shadow box behind his purple heart. Evidence. Then he lay back on the mattress. Above him he heard footsteps, furniture being dragged, the house being erased piece by piece. They wanted him to sleep. They wanted him sedated. He'd give them a show. But behind the act, his mind would be working. Kevin had bought himself time. 3 months, maybe less. He needed Kenneth pliable, confused, ready to sign whatever documents came next. Kenneth closed his eyes and began to breathe. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Tactical breathing, the same technique he'd taught recruits in Kuwait. Tomorrow, he'd start gathering intelligence. Tonight, he'd let them think they'd won. Above him, someone laughed. The sound carried through the ductwork, tinny and cruel. Kenneth smiled in the dark. The mouse they'd caught was actually the one setting the trap. Day 4 in the basement, Kenneth discovered the house's secret. It started with hunger. They'd been feeding him twice a day, morning and evening, whatever scraps Michelle deemed acceptable. Yesterday it had been a bologna sandwich on white bread. This morning, dry cereal in a plastic bowl, no milk. Kenneth had eaten in worse conditions. The hunger was manageable. What wasn't manageable was the boredom they expected him to feel, the isolation designed to make him grateful for any human contact, even Kevin's. They didn't know he'd spent 6 months in Diego Garcia with nothing but supply manifests and shortwave radio. Solitude didn't break Kenneth Taylor. It sharpened him. He'd been studying the basement, the ductwork specifically. The heating system was old, original to the house, galvanized steel tubes running like arteries through the ceiling, carrying air to every room, and sound. Kenneth had learned the trick in barracks in Kuwait. If you put your ear to the main intake vent, you could hear conversations from 3 rooms away. He dragged the cardboard boxes to the center of the room, stacked them carefully, climbed up, joints protesting, until he was eye level with the main vent, pressed his ear against cold metal. At first, just the rush of air. Then, footsteps. Hard heels on wood. Michelle. Softer steps behind her. Kevin. They were in the living room, directly above the intake. "Can't keep stalling the contractors," Michelle was saying. "They want the deposit, $15,000. "I know." Kevin's voice was tight, stressed. "I'm working on it." "Working on what?" "We emptied the joint account. That's gone. The credit cards are maxed. Where's the money coming from?" A pause. Kenneth pressed harder against the vent, ignoring the ache in his raised arms. "I talked to Webb," Kevin said finally. "Garrett Webb?" Michelle's voice went sharp with fear. "Jesus, Kevin, you said you were done with him." "I am. I just need one more extension, just until we sell the house." "And if we can't sell it fast enough?" Another pause, longer this time. When Kevin spoke, his voice was lower. Kenneth had to strain to hear. "We won't have to worry about it. The old man's declining fast. You saw him yesterday. He couldn't even remember what day it was." "Because you're giving him horse tranquilizers instead of heart medication," Michelle hissed. "What if he has a stroke? What if someone finds out?" "Who's going to find out? He doesn't see anyone. We took his phone. We took his car. He's a ghost." "What about the lawyer? Stone?" Kenneth's breath stopped. Douglas Stone, Sandra's lawyer. "Stone hasn't called in 5 years," Kevin said. "Ever since Mom's diagnosis. Whatever trust she set up, it's dormant. Probably just life insurance, and we already know that's only $50,000. Barely covers the funeral." Wrong, Kenneth thought. So wrong. "But what if the old man dies?" Michelle pressed. "What if he has a heart attack down there? We can't exactly call 911 and say, 'Oops, we've been holding him prisoner.'" "He's not going to die." Kevin's voice carried a strange certainty. "Not yet. The doctor said at his age, with the stress and the diet we have him on, cognitive decline happens fast. 6 months, maybe less. By Christmas he'll be in such bad shape that putting him in a state facility will look like mercy. He'll go quietly. Natural causes." Kenneth's hands were shaking now, not from acting, from rage. "And then?" Michelle asked. "And then we sell the house, pay off Webb, and start over. Maybe California, somewhere nobody knows about Horizon Design." Horizon Design. Kenneth filed the name away. The voices moved away, footsteps receding toward the kitchen. Kenneth climbed down from the boxes, sat on the mattress, pulled out the flip phone from its hiding place in the shadow box lining. His hands were steady now, 40 years of training kicking back in. He typed a text message to Douglas Stone's number. "Asset under threat. Require immediate intelligence package on son Kevin Taylor. Business Horizon Design. Do not extract. Maintain surveillance only." He hesitated over the send button. Once he pushed this, there was no going back. This stopped being a family problem and became an operation. Kenneth thought about Sandra, about the way she'd looked at him 6 months before she died, lucid between pain medication doses. "Promise me you'll protect yourself. Kevin's not what he seems." She'd known, and she'd tried to warn him, and he'd been too proud to listen. He pressed send. The message disappeared. 3 dots appeared. Then, confirmed. Stone and Associates initiating deep background. Surveillance team will establish perimeter. Expect contact within 48 hours. Are you safe for now? Kenneth looked around the basement, at the locked door, at the pills designed to make him confused, at the mattress on concrete. He typed, "Safe enough. They think I'm broken. Let them." The reply came instantly. "Understood. Jake Harrison will make contact. Former MARSOC. You'll recognize the type. Kenneth allowed himself a small smile. MARSOC, Marine Special Operations, the kind of man who'd know how to run a surveillance operation without being seen. He deleted the message thread and hid the phone. Upstairs, a door slammed. More footsteps. The house was being dismantled around him, piece by piece. But Kenneth wasn't worried anymore. The enemy had revealed their timeline. Christmas, 6 months. They thought they had time. They were wrong. Kenneth lay back on the mattress and closed his eyes. Tomorrow, Jake Harrison would make contact. Tomorrow, he'd start learning what Horizon Design really was. Tonight, he'd sleep the sleep of a soldier who'd just called for backup. The war wasn't over. It had just entered a new phase. The park bench was cold enough to hurt. Kenneth sat anyway, watching ducks fight over breadcrumbs some kid had thrown into the pond. His chest ached, a dull, persistent throb that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with missing 6 days of heart medication. Kevin had given him permission to walk to the park. Translation, the house had showings today, and Kenneth's presence would lower the asking price. Can't sell a house with a confused old man wandering the halls. Kenneth checked his watch. 10:47 a.m. The text had said 10:45. Beautiful morning. The voice came from his left. Kenneth didn't turn, didn't react. A man sat down on the other end of the bench, mid-40s, athletic build, wearing running clothes that were just expensive enough to blend in with the neighborhood. Keep watching the ducks, the man said quietly. Name's Jake Harrison. Stone sent me. Kenneth nodded slightly. You're late. Had to make sure you weren't followed. Jake pulled out a phone, pretended to check it like any jogger taking a break. Your son's got a guy named Tommy Reeves watching the house, low-level PI, mostly does insurance fraud. He's in a gray Civic 2 blocks east, not good at his job. What did you find? Jake swiped his phone screen, though Kenneth knew he was reading from memory. Kevin Taylor, age 38, architectural degree from Penn State, opened Horizon Design Partners 6 years ago, high-end residential, commercial projects. And it was a front. He never had legitimate clients. The whole thing was a Ponzi scheme dressed up as a design firm. He'd show investors 3D renderings of luxury developments, condos in Boca, townhouses in Charleston, took deposits, promised 20% returns. Kenneth's jaw tightened. How much? He took in about $2.1 million over 4 years, paid early investors with new money, standard pyramid structure, but the well dried up 8 months ago. Now he's got 87 victims asking where their money went, and the FBI's been building a case since March. The ducks scattered as a larger bird landed. Kenneth watched them regroup, restructure their hierarchy. Why hasn't he been arrested? Feds want him for money laundering, not just fraud. They're waiting for him to move a large sum, something that proves he's washing the stolen money through legitimate channels. That's a 10-year federal charge versus a 2-year state fraud rap. The house, Kenneth said. Exactly. He sells your house for $400,000, claims it's inheritance, uses that clean money to pay back his biggest creditor, guy named Garrett Webb. Webb's not mob, but he's close enough. Private equity vulture. Kevin owes him $400,000 plus interest. Webb's deadline is Christmas. Kenneth absorbed this. So Kevin needs me to die or disappear before the house sells. Otherwise, care costs eat into the money he needs to stay alive. That's our assessment. Jake shifted on the bench, still maintaining the jogger at rest posture. There's more. Your wife knew. Kenneth's head snapped toward Jake before he could stop himself. Eyes front, Jake said calmly. Sandra hired Stone & Associates 9 months ago. She'd discovered the Ponzi scheme. One of the victims was a friend from her book club. She traced it back to Kevin, confirmed everything, but she couldn't bring herself to turn him in. Because she's his mother, Kenneth said softly. Because she's his mother, Jake agreed. So instead, she set up a protection protocol. The Taylor Holdings Trust was restructured. Your house, your assets, $42 million, Mr. Taylor, all locked behind a legal firewall. Kevin can't touch it, and she hired us to watch over you after she passed. Kenneth felt something crack in his chest. Not physical, deeper. Sandra had known. She'd known their son was a criminal, and she'd died keeping that secret. Died protecting Kenneth from the truth. She left you instructions, Jake continued. When we make contact, I'm supposed to tell you, the good life isn't about comfort. It's about doing what's right, even when it costs everything. Kenneth closed his eyes. That was Sandra. Always Sandra. "We can extract you right now," Jake said. "Give the word, and in 10 minutes you're in a hotel. Kevin's arrested, assets frozen, clean and simple." "No. Sir. He needs to confess." Kenneth opened his eyes, watching the ducks. "If we move now, Kevin claims ignorance, says he was just a concerned son, gets a sympathetic jury, reduced sentence. He needs to show his hand completely. I need evidence he was planning to kill me, not just neglect me." Jake was quiet for a moment. "That's dangerous. You're not in good shape, Mr. Taylor. Your color's bad. You need medical attention." "I need justice." Kenneth stood up slowly, playing the elderly man Kevin expected. "How long can you give me?" "Christmas is 12 weeks away. FBI says if Kevin doesn't move money by then, Webb will move on him, violently." Jake pulled a newspaper from his gym bag, set it on the bench. "Everything you need is in the sports section. Phone, detailed financial records, Webb's known associates, check-ins every 48 hours, or we extract you by force." Kenneth picked up the newspaper. "Understood." "One more thing." Jake stood, stretched like he was finishing his break. "Your son's not just desperate, he's cornered. Cornered animals do unpredictable things. Watch your back." "I survived Fallujah," Kenneth said. "I can survive my son." Jake jogged away, disappearing into the tree line. Kenneth walked back toward the house, newspaper tucked under his arm. The pain in his chest was worse now, real cardiac distress, not acting. He had maybe 3 months before his body gave out. Kevin had 12 weeks to get the money. The clock was ticking for both of them. Kenneth worked by the light of the single bare bulb, his shadow long against the concrete wall. The leather journal sat open on his lap, his old field notebook from Desert Storm. He'd carried it through 3 deployments, filled it with supply coordinates, personnel rosters, tactical notes that meant nothing to anyone anymore. Now it was about to mean everything. On the last page, in his careful handwriting, Kenneth wrote, "First National Bank Safety Deposit Box 512, access code 72991. He stared at the numbers. July 29th, 1991, the day he'd shipped home from Kuwait, the day he'd promised Sandra he was done with war. The box existed. He'd opened it 30 years ago, stored some old contracts there. Kenneth knew exactly what was inside, declassified logistics reports and a stack of forged debt documents he'd created this afternoon, showing massive loans to fictional contractors. If Kevin opened that box, he'd think Kenneth was drowning in hidden debt, broke, not rich. It was a decoy, a honey trap. But Kevin wouldn't open the box, not yet. First, he'd need the code. Then he'd need Kenneth's legal authorization. That meant forcing the power of attorney. Kenneth closed the journal, ran his thumb across the worn leather. He'd kept this book through firefights and sandstorms. Now it was ammunition in a different kind of war. He placed it in the nightstand drawer, the flimsy particle board thing they'd salvaged from the trash pile. Not hidden, just private enough to look like a secret. Upstairs, footsteps, heavy and rhythmic. Kevin pacing. Kenneth checked his watch, 11:47 p.m. He took the evening pill from his organizer, the white tramadol Kevin thought he was taking, placed it in his mouth, filled a paper cup with water from the utility sink, swallowed loudly. Then he spit the pill into his hand, wrapped it in tissue, added it to the collection in his shadow box. 18 pills now, 18 days of evidence. Kenneth lay down on the mattress, positioned himself on his side, one arm dangling off the edge. He slowed his breathing, deepened it, added the wet rattle of sedated sleep, and waited. At 2:17 a.m. the door opened. Kenneth heard it through the layers of manufactured sleep, the soft click of the deadbolt retracting, the whisper of hinges that needed oil. A beam of light cut through the darkness, swept across the floor, footsteps on the stairs. Careful, quiet, Kevin in socks. Kenneth kept his breathing steady. In, pause, out with slight snore. Pause. The rhythm of deep sedation. His eyelids stayed closed, but not quite tight. Through the blur of his eyelashes, he could see shapes moving. Kevin reached the bottom, paused. The flashlight beam landed on Kenneth's face. Kenneth didn't flinch, didn't react. He let his mouth hang slightly open, let drool gather at the corner. A man so deep under that nothing could wake him. The light moved away. Kevin went to the boxes first, rifling through clothes, papers, looking for bank statements, account numbers, anything with Kenneth's financial fingerprints. He found nothing, because everything real was locked in Stone's vault. Kenneth heard the frustration in Kevin's breathing, short, sharp exhales, then footsteps approaching the nightstand. The drawer scraped open. Kenneth risked opening his eyes a millimeter more. Kevin stood over the nightstand, flashlight illuminating the journal. His hands were shaking as he opened it, flipped through pages of old tactical notes. Then he found the last page. Kevin's breath caught. In the dim light, Kenneth saw his son's face change, desperation transforming into triumph. Kevin pulled out his phone, photographed the page. The camera flash lit up the basement for a split second. Then Kevin closed the journal carefully, replaced it exactly as he'd found it. He approached Kenneth's mattress. The flashlight beam washed over Kenneth's face again. Kenneth kept his mouth open, his breathing deep and drugged. Kevin leaned close. Kenneth could smell coffee and fear sweat. "I've got the code, old man," Kevin whispered. "Tomorrow, I make you sign the power of attorney, and then—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Kevin walked back up the stairs. The door closed. The deadbolt slid home. Kenneth opened his eyes in the darkness. His heart was racing. Real adrenaline, not acting. Kevin had taken the bait perfectly. Tomorrow, Kevin would bring a lawyer. Tomorrow, the trap would spring. Kenneth reached under his pillow for the phone Jake had given him. Typed a message. "Target acquired bait. Estimate forced POA. A signing attempt within 24 hours. Prepare extraction team. I'll give signal." Stone's reply came in seconds. "Team ready. What's the signal?" Kenneth thought about the breakfast table, about witnesses, about creating a scene chaotic enough to destroy documents while proving coercion. "Hot water," he typed. "When you see the ambulance call, that's go time." He deleted the messages and hid the phone. Above him, he heard Kevin's footsteps moving toward the bedroom, heard Michelle's voice, muffled but excited. "Did you find it?" "I found it," Kevin said. "We're going to be okay." Kenneth smiled in the dark. No, they weren't. The smell of bacon brought Kenneth upstairs at 8 a.m. Real bacon, thick-cut, hickory-smoked, the kind Sandra used to make, the kind you cook when you want something from someone. Kevin stood at the stove, spatula in hand, wearing a polo shirt that screamed respectable suburban dad. Michelle was setting the dining table, the good china, actual napkins, orange juice in a glass pitcher. "Morning, Dad," Kevin said without turning. "Hungry?" Kenneth shuffled to the table, playing his part. Hunched shoulders, trembling hands, a man beaten down by grief and medication. "What's all this?" "Family breakfast." Michelle pulled out a chair. "We thought you could use a good meal." Kenneth sat. The chair felt too soft after a week on concrete. The bacon smelled like a trap. A stack of papers sat next to his plate. "We found a great insurance plan for you," Michelle said brightly. "For Sunny Meadows. It's the VIP package. Private room, physical therapy, 24/7 nursing care. But enrollment closes today." She tapped the top page. "Just need your signature here, here, and here." Kenneth picked up the papers with shaking hands. The top sheet was a medical form, generic, innocuous, but it was slightly askew. Underneath, he could see different paper, heavier stock, different font. He squinted, pulled the papers closer to his face. "I can't read this. Where are my glasses?" "They broke, remember?" Kevin set a plate of eggs in front of him. "Just sign, Dad. It's just insurance paperwork." Kenneth let the top sheet slide off. The document underneath was exposed. General Durable Power of Attorney. "Power of Attorney," Kenneth read slowly, sounding out the syllables like a child. "This doesn't say insurance. This says you get control of everything." "It's the same thing," Kevin said quickly. "The insurance company requires POA to process your claims. It's standard." "I don't think—" "Dad," Kevin's voice hardened, "we're trying to help you. Do you want to end up in a state facility? Do you want to die alone in some Medicaid warehouse?" The threat was naked now, no pretense of concern. "I need someone to explain it to me," Kenneth said. "A lawyer, someone official." Kevin's face went red. His hand slammed down on the table, rattling the dishes. "You want a lawyer? Fine. Harold Peterson's coming at 10. He'll read every word if that's what it takes. But you're signing today, Dad, one way or another." He leaned close, invading Kenneth's space. Your good life is over. Accept it. At 10 a.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. Harold Peterson looked exactly like a man who'd notarize anything for the right price. Rumpled suit, nervous eyes, briefcase held together with duct tape. He sat up at the dining table without pleasantries. Mr. Taylor, he said, pulling out his stamp, I understand you want to grant your son financial authority? Kenneth looked at Kevin, then at Michelle standing in the kitchen doorway, phone in hand, recording everything. He reached for the coffee Michelle had poured. His hand was shaking, real tremor now from missing his heart medication. The cup was full, scalding hot. I just want to make sure I understand, Kenneth said, his voice querulous and old. He held the cup in his left hand, picked up a pen with his right. If I sign this, Kevin sells the house. Where does my half go? There is no half, Kevin snapped. The money goes into an estate account for your care. But it's my house. I should get 50%. That's fair. Sandra would want... Forget about Sandra, Kevin exploded. He lunged across the table, face inches from Kenneth's. Forget about the 50%. You're not getting a dime, you understand? Not one penny. This money is mine. You owe me this for 40 years of being a useless father. Peterson looked up, alarmed. Mr. Taylor, perhaps we should... Shut up, Kevin snarled. He grabbed Kenneth's wrist. Sign the paper, old man. Sign it or I'll break your fingers and forge it myself. Kenneth's hand spasmed. The coffee cup flew. 12 ounces of near-boiling liquid hit Peterson square in the lap. The lawyer screamed, a high, horrible sound. His chair tipped backward, papers scattered. The power of attorney document landed in the puddle of coffee, ink bleeding, words dissolving. Chaos. Michelle dropped her phone. Peterson writhed on the floor. Kevin lunged for Kenneth. Kenneth ran, not shuffled, ran, down the hallway, into the bathroom, door slamming, lock engaging. Behind him, Kevin pounded the wood. Open this door. Open it right now. Kenneth pulled out the burner phone, hands steady now. No more trembling. He stopped the recording he'd been making. 30 minutes of Kevin's threats, all captured. He texted Stone, now, Omega Protocol, activate. The reply was instant. Team en route, ETA 6 minutes. Kenneth texted Jake, 911 call in 30 seconds. Elderly man, chest pain, 847 Oakmont. Make it real. Through the door, Kevin was screaming. Michelle was crying. Peterson was threatening to sue. Kenneth looked at himself in the mirror. The man staring back wasn't the prisoner from the basement anymore. He was Kenneth Taylor, military contractor, survivor. And the extraction team was coming. He pressed his hand to his chest, let himself feel the real pain there, the arrhythmia, the strain, called 911 on the burner phone. Help, he gasped into the phone. My son, he's trying to hurt me. I'm having chest pain. Please. He gave the address and hung up. Sirens in the distance, growing closer. Kevin's pounding stopped. Dad? Dad, what did you do? Kenneth didn't answer. He was counting down. The war was about to end. The sirens changed everything. Kenneth heard them through the bathroom door, distant at first, then closer, then right outside. Kevin's pounding stopped. Footsteps retreated, frantic voices. Police are coming, Michelle hissed. We need to go, now! No, Kevin's voice was tight with panic. We take him. If he talks to the cops, if they investigate, we're done. Get the van, the one we rented. Kenneth's chest pain was real now. Not acting. The arrhythmia was building, his heart skipping beats like a damaged engine. He leaned against the sink, breathing through it. Not yet. Just hold on a little longer. The bathroom door exploded inward. Kevin's shoulder hit it twice before the cheap lock gave way. Kevin grabbed Kenneth's arm, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. You're coming with us. Where? Kenneth let himself be pulled, playing weak. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere you can't ruin everything. Michelle was already backing the rental van into the driveway, a white cargo van, windowless, anonymous, the kind of vehicle that could carry anything, anywhere, and no one would notice. Kevin shoved Kenneth into the back. No seats, just empty metal space. The doors slammed shut, locks engaged. Through the front partition, Kenneth could hear them. What about the ambulance? Michelle's voice was shaking. Fuck the ambulance, drive. The van lurched forward. Kenneth braced himself against the cold metal wall. Through the rear windows, he saw the ambulance pulling up to the house, saw neighbors starting to gather. Good. Witnesses. Jake's voice echoed in his memory. Cornered animals do unpredictable things. Kenneth pulled out the burner phone. His hands were shaking for real now, adrenaline and cardiac distress mixing into something dangerous. He typed GPS coordinates to Jake, then activated the phone's tracking beacon. The van turned onto the highway, heading east, toward the county line, toward the industrial wasteland where the city buried its mistakes. Kenneth knew where they were going. Green Valley. Not a care facility, a warehouse for the forgotten. The kind of place where an old man could disappear and no one would ask questions. He closed his eyes and focused on breathing. In 4, hold 4, out 4. His chest felt like it was caught in a vice, just a little longer. 20 minutes later, the van slowed. Kenneth looked through the partition and saw it, a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Beyond it, a squat gray building with barred windows, Green Valley Assisted Living. Kevin pulled up to the gate, punched in a code. The rusted barrier groaned open. He drove forward and slammed on the brakes so hard Kenneth hit the partition wall. Jesus Christ, Kevin breathed. Kenneth pulled himself up and looked. 3 black SUVs blocked the road, parked in perfect formation, engines idling, tinted windows, government plates. Back up, Michelle said. Back up right now. Kevin threw the van into reverse and froze. In the rearview mirror, a 4th SUV had appeared, blocking their exit. They were boxed in. Who is that? Michelle's voice climbed an octave. Is that Webb? Did Garrett find us? I don't know. Kevin grabbed the tire iron from under his seat, knuckles white. Lock the doors. The doors were already locked. Kenneth reached for the handle, pushed. The door swung open. How did you... Kevin spun around. Kenneth climbed out slowly, deliberately. His chest was on fire, but he kept his spine straight. No more hunched shoulders, no more shuffle. The SUV doors opened in unison. Men in tactical gear emerged, not police, but private security, professional, disciplined. From the lead vehicle, Douglas Stone stepped out. Silver hair, 3-piece suit, the bearing of a man who'd never lost a case. Beside him, Jake Harrison. Kevin stumbled out of the van, waving the tire iron. Stay back! This is kidnapping! You have no authority! Kevin Taylor. Stone's voice cut through the panic like a knife. Put down the weapon. Who the hell are you? Douglas Stone. I represent the Taylor Holdings Trust. And you, Mr. Taylor, are in significant legal trouble. Kevin looked at Kenneth, confusion warring with terror. Dad? What trust? What is he talking about? Kenneth stood between his son and the security team. The pain in his chest was crushing now, radiating down his left arm, but his voice was steady. The trust your mother and I built, he said. $42 million, the money you thought didn't exist. Kevin's face went white. 42? That's not possible. You're a retired manager. You have nothing. I checked. You checked what I let you see. Kenneth took a step forward. His vision was starting to blur at the edges. The house, the car, the bank account, all decoys. Your mother's name on everything because we knew. We knew you'd come for it someday. Mom knew? Kevin's voice cracked. She knew about Horizon Design, Stone interjected, pulling documents from his briefcase. She knew about the Ponzi scheme. She knew about the 87 people you defrauded. And before she died, she hired me to protect your father from you. Michelle started crying. Real tears this time, not performance. Kevin, you told me there was no evidence. Shut up! Kevin rounded on her, then back to Kenneth. Dad, please. I'm your son. I'm your blood. You can't do this. Kenneth felt his heart skip another beat, 2 beats. The world tilted. You tried to kill me, Kevin. You poisoned me. You locked me in a basement. You were driving me to a place where I'd disappear. Kenneth's voice was getting weaker. You stopped being my son the moment you decided I was worth more dead than alive. Sheriff's cruisers were pulling up now, lights flashing, real police, real arrest. Kevin Taylor, Sheriff Miller stepped forward with handcuffs. You're under arrest for wire fraud, elder abuse, attempted kidnapping. Kevin lunged at Kenneth, not to attack, to beg. He fell to his knees, grabbing Kenneth's jacket. Dad, call them off. Tell them it's a misunderstanding. I'll pay everyone back. I swear. Just don't let them... Kenneth looked down at his son, at the man who'd inherited his eyes but none of his integrity. You're fired, Kenneth said quietly. Fired from this family. The trust is locked, every asset frozen. The house proceeds go to your victim's restitution fund. You get nothing. Dad. And I'm funding your prosecution. Kenneth pulled free from Kevin's grip. Every resource Stone needs to ensure you spend the next decade in federal prison. I'm providing it. Not because I hate you, because your mother would want you to face consequences. Kevin's face crumpled. Deputies moved in, cuffing him, reading his rights. Michelle was already in another cruiser, screaming about divorce, about being coerced. Kenneth watched them take his son away, watched Kevin's face in the cruiser window, broken, disbelieving, and then Kenneth's heart stopped playing games. The pain exploded in his chest. Real, catastrophic. His knees buckled. "Mr. Taylor!" Jake caught him before he hit the gravel. "Medic! We need a medic now!" The ambulance that had been on standby came screaming forward. Paramedics swarmed. Kenneth felt hands on him, oxygen mask, voices shouting medical terms. Myocardial infarction, BP dropping. Start an IV. Kenneth looked up at the sky. It was blue, clear, Sandra's favorite kind of day. I won, he thought, but God, what did it cost? The world faded to white. Kenneth woke up 3 days later in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and failure. Douglas Stone was sitting in the visitor's chair, reading a legal brief. "Welcome back," Stone said, setting down his papers. "You gave us quite a scare." Kenneth's throat was dry. "Kevin?" "County jail. Bail set at $2 million. No one's posting it. FBI added money laundering charges this morning. They found evidence he was planning to wash the house money through offshore accounts." Stone poured water into a plastic cup, helped Kenneth drink. "Michelle's cooperating. Gave them everything in exchange for immunity." "How bad was it?" Kenneth gestured at the monitors. "Moderate myocardial infarction. The cardiologist says 6 months minimum recovery. You'll need medication, lifestyle changes, no more sleeping in basements." Kenneth almost smiled. "The victims?" 87 people, total losses around $1.8 million. You've authorized full restitution from the trust. They'll be made whole. Good. Kenneth closed his eyes. "That's good. There's someone who wants to see you," Stone said, "if you're up for it." A week later, Kenneth sat in the county jail visiting room, oxygen tank at his side, looking at his son through plexiglass. Kevin looked smaller, broken. The orange jumpsuit hung on him like a costume for a play he hadn't auditioned for. "Why did you come?" Kevin asked. His voice was hollow. "Because your mother would want me to." Kenneth leaned forward, the effort making him breathe harder. "She loved you, Kevin. Even knowing what you'd become, even knowing what you'd done." "I didn't mean for it to go this far," Kevin said. "The business failed. I panicked. I thought if I could just get enough money to reset." "You thought you could erase your father." Kenneth's voice was quiet but firm. "You chose murder over honesty." Kevin flinched. "I wasn't going to kill you. I just needed you out of the way." "That's the same thing." Kenneth pulled an envelope from his jacket. "I'm not innocent in this. I was gone for years, chasing contracts, building wealth I thought would make up for absence. I thought money would protect you. Instead, it poisoned you." He slid the envelope through the slot. "That's contact information for a defense attorney. I'm paying for your representation, not because you deserve it, because your mother loved you and I loved her." Kevin opened it with shaking hands. "Why?" "Because she'd want you to have a fair trial. After that, you're on your own." Kenneth stood slowly, using the chair for support. "I hope prison gives you what the good life never did. Time to figure out who you actually are." "Dad," Kevin's voice cracked, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Kenneth looked at his son one last time. "I know. But sorry doesn't undo what you did. It just means you finally understand the cost." He walked out. Every step hurt. Not just his damaged heart. Everything. Behind him he heard Kevin sobbing. Kenneth didn't look back. 2 months later, Kenneth stood in the empty house on Oakmont Drive. The realtor had called. Multiple offers, all above asking. The proceeds would go to the Taylor Veterans Foundation. Every dollar Kevin had stolen, repaid. Every victim, made whole. Kenneth walked through the rooms one last time. Kitchen, where Sandra taught Kevin to bake. Living room, where they'd celebrated birthdays. Bedroom, where she'd died holding his hand. "Goodbye," he whispered to the walls. He drove himself to the airport, a new car, sensible and modest. No more Lincoln, no more pretending to be less than he was. The doctor had cleared him to fly, barely. "Take it easy," she'd said. "Your heart's not what it was." Nothing was what it was. At the gate, Kenneth pulled out a photo. Sandra on a beach in Italy, 1985. The trip they'd always meant to take. The life they'd always meant to live. "I'm going for both of us," he told her picture. The flight attendant smiled as he boarded. "Traveling alone, sir?" Kenneth looked at the photo in his hand. Not exactly. He settled into his seat, first class because he'd earned it. Through the window, he watched Philadelphia disappear beneath the clouds. Kevin had said his good life was over. He'd been right about one thing. The old life was done. The life of secrets and silence and trying to protect everyone from truth. But Kenneth Taylor, at 68 years old, with a damaged heart and a conscience finally clear, was just beginning to understand what good actually meant. It wasn't comfort. It wasn't wealth. It was choosing what's right, even when it costs everything. The plane turned east, toward Rome, toward the promise he'd made to a woman who'd saved him one last time. Kenneth closed his eyes and let himself rest. The war was over. He'd won. But more importantly, he'd survived.